is Ishmael. The Arab. This means God hears. Ishmael, God hears. This is Israel, same form. God rules. But that's not how the poet presented it. But I'm sure that was what the original meaning of the term was. This is the people who have no other king but God, whom God rules. And I think that's a much more satisfying understanding of the term Israel than the one you get in the Bible. So here I part company with the Bible. Just on common sense. I don't think that man struggling with God flies at all. It's just that some clever poet winged it like that, and then everyone else, when it got into the oral tradition and finally got into the written form of the Bible, mouths it like lemmings. That's what I mean. At some point, you can stop being a lemming. Things that make sense, I think, should be accepted. Things that don't make sense should be questioned, whatever the tradition is. So to me, in my mind, if I was a Jew, and if I cared about Israel, I would hate to think his name would, actually was based on wrestling, man who wrestled with God. I think that's just a poet's baloney. I don't want to say insulting terms from the camera here. I think it really means something really inspiring. The people whom God rules. Yisrael, God rules. That's a great understanding. I'm sure it's absolutely true. Okay, so this is around, let's say, 2000 BC. By this time, they're reckoning all his children as part of who they are. So we get the 12 tribes, all his sons as such. All this is still pretty mythological, I think, but it's genealogical. And then we keep coming down here till one tribal son becomes particularly important, Joseph, because he's the one who goes to Egypt. So that's 17th to 16th century. And he blazes the way to Egypt. Yeah, what's wrong?
You have 4 minutes of
Yeah, that's right. Well, we're done. So he blazes the way to Egypt there. And then from Joseph, which is, we have a captivity period, and then we have a Moses somewhere around the 13th or 14th century, 200 or 300, 400 years later, according to the Bible. And he's from a different tribe. And then we have an exodus of sorts, and then Joshua is his assistant, and a conquest period in Palestine. And so we're down into around the 1200 period of Judges, 1100 BC. And then finally we get the Davidic monarchy coming out of that, rising up, which is about 1000 BC. And the rise of the first temple under David. And David is not strong enough to keep his kingdom together under Solomon, 900, Solomon. And then it falls apart, so you get two kingdoms. One, the north, called Israel. The divided monarchy, the south, called Judah. And you're from about 900 to 700 BC. 700 BC, the Assyrian conquest knocks off the north, and you're left with only the south, Jews. So from that moment you have Judea coming from Jews, no more Israelites. So from here on in, we're with Judeans, which comes into Arabic as Yehud, Europeans, Juden in German, English somehow got to be Jew. So there are no Jews after that period. 600, this collapses with Nebuchadnezzar. The first temple coming from David is destroyed. We get a captivity period for another 40 years or so. The returnees start to come back around 540 to about 440. Nothing much is happening. Nehemiah and Ezra are in that period. And only a smattering of returnees come back from Babylon. That's the captivity period, and the Bible comes to a close. We have a few other writings that are sort of scatty after that, but actually the Bible goes into a dark period. And until the Maccabean period, which is 200 BC, or around 175 BC, we don't have a lot of concrete information. We're really in a dark period. But then we come out of it with writers like Josephus and others. and it brings us down to the period of the Romans. First, the struggle with the Greeks that produced the holiday that the Jews today even commemorate as Hanukkah, the dedication of the temple. And then finally, the Roman storming of Jerusalem under Pompey in 67 BC, Pompey being Caesar's erstwhile colleague and ultimately his enemy that Caesar struggled with. And that's the exact moment of Roman takeover. So the Roman takeover in Palestine that we're dealing with, that sets the background to the Christian story 100 years later, is 100 years before the so-called ministry of Christ. It's 60 or 70 years before the birth of this figure that we call Christ, and before his actual activities, good 100 years. So you have to understand, we have 100 years of foreign occupation acting itself out in various ways prior to this. And we'll pick up there next time, but I hope that filled in a few pieces for you, historically speaking, quickly. And it's very easy once you can digest it all. Thanks a lot, Noel. Oh, let me see, I turned it off, right? Stop, no. I wanted to start off, like I said, in I want to start off, like I said, with looking at Eusebius. But first of all, we were doing the background a little bit. And how far down in the history did we get? Got down to the Maccabean period? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we trace the history down from the beginning of time to the Maccabean period. So what is the Maccabean period primarily noted for? Well, it's a freedom struggle, a national liberation struggle. That's really what the Jewish festival of Hanukkah is about. Hanukkah is their commemoration even to the modern period. It's very weird that they would be commemorating a military victory 2,200 years later or so. And that's one of the problems with Hanukkah, actually. I'll write it on the board here where the Jews are concerned. I think, you know, when you're trying to culturally survive as a people or a culture, you have to have symbols that are meaningful to your constituents as opposed to symbols of other people who are in a democratic melting pot pulling on them, right? So